Morgan slipped the data crystal into her pocket and moved silently through the dimly lit corridors of the lunar mining facility. The night shift guards were mostly stationed near the processing centers, not in the living quarters where exhausted workers slept. She waited for the telltale flash of the security drone scan before darting across the main junction. Her quarters were modest: a sleeping pod, sanitation unit, and nutrition station packed into 20 square meters. But they had one advantage. Previous occupants had discovered a maintenance shaft behind the environmental control panel. Morgan removed the panel and crawled into the narrow space, replacing the cover behind her. The cramped tunnel opened into a forgotten storage room from the original lunar base, built decades before the Vordak's arrival. Here she had collected contraband, paper books, mechanical tools, and now the most dangerous possession of all: evidence of humanity's suppression. Morgan activated a shielded tablet and inserted the crystal. Her brother's face appeared on screen, gaunt but determined. "If you're watching this, I'm already gone," he said softly. "But what I found cannot die with me." He explained how he'd gained access to restricted Vordak's research files while repairing cooling systems in their lunar laboratories. The files contained comparative studies of neural architecture across species. Humans were unique. Their neural pathways constantly formed new connections, especially under stress. Vordak scientists describe this adaptation as chaotic and unpredictable, terms Morgan recognized as their highest forms of criticism. "They fear what they cannot model," her brother continued, "and human creativity cannot be reduced to their algorithms." The most damning evidence came from test footage. Morgan watched humans solving complex problems in simulation environments, consistently finding solutions the Vordak's prediction systems failed to anticipate. More shocking were brain scans showing that test subjects performed better under pressure, the opposite of Vordak species who required perfect stability for optimal function. Morgan's hand unconsciously touched the small bump behind her ear, her own inhibitor implant. According to the data, the device subtly disrupted the formation of new neural pathways and released mild dampening chemicals during stress responses. "We're not just laborers to them," her brother's recording concluded. "We're a potential threat. The only species they've encountered whose minds become more effective in crisis rather than less." Dawn morning lights began to pulse, signaling approach of the work shift. Morgan quickly powered down the tablet and tucked the crystal into a hidden compartment. As she crawled back through the maintenance shaft, her mind was working faster than it had in years, already forming connections, seeing patterns. That day, as she calibrated extraction drills deep in the lunar regolith, Morgan observed her Vordak supervisor with new eyes. The tall, iridescent being moved with precise, unchanging patterns, each decision following rigid protocols. When a minor equipment malfunction occurred, the supervisor called for a technical specialist rather than attempting even simple troubleshooting. Morgan realized they had revealed their greatest weakness. The Vordaks were creatures of perfect order, unable to improvise, and they had built their empire on the backs of the universe's most adaptable species. That night, Morgan Chen began planning her rebellion. The ventilation shaft narrowed as Morgan crawled forward, the cold metal pressing against her shoulders. Ahead, Dr. Okafor worked on the security panel with methodical precision. Their breathing seemed thunderous in the confined space, though the noise of the Martian research facility's environmental systems would mask any sound they made. "How much longer?" Morgan whispered. "Patience," the doctor replied, his fingers moving delicately across the exposed circuitry. Vordak's security systems look for patterns of interference. Random fluctuations pass unnoticed. After 3 weeks of planning, their team had infiltrated the facility during the scheduled magnetic storm. Zhao Wei had piloted their unmarked shuttle through the turbulence with impossible skill, landing in a maintenance crater beyond sensor range. Now, everything depended on timing and the element of surprise. The panel lights shifted from amber to green. Okafor nodded, and Morgan slid past him into the laboratory antechamber. Through the observation window, she saw what they had come for: 23 humans suspended in fluid-filled chambers, Neural interfaces connected directly to their exposed brains. Aisha, waiting at their makeshift command post 2 levels below, spoke through their concealed earpieces. Security rotation in 8 minutes. The commander's shuttle just requested unscheduled landing clearance. Morgan felt a cold spike of fear. This wasn't in their intelligence reports. Cause: unknown, the teen replied, her voice steady despite the complication. But they're preparing a full welcome protocol. Morgan exchanged glances with Okafor. We need to move faster. They worked quickly, disabling the stasis fields in sequence. The first subject, a woman about Morgan's age, gasped as consciousness returned. Morgan helped her from the chamber, explaining in hushed tones. We're with the resistance. Can you walk? The woman nodded weakly. They've had me here for months. They keep testing how I solve problems. As they worked, Okafor downloaded research data. Morgan, he called softly. You need to see this. The screen showed comparative brain scans. Human neural activity appeared as chaotic starburst patterns next to the orderly, predictable flows of Vordax brains. According to these notes, human intuition is generating solutions their predictive models cannot anticipate, Okafor explained. When they introduced artificial stress variables, the disparity increased. Under pressure, human mental processing actually accelerates while Vordax cognition degrades. They were freeing the last test subject when the facility lights shifted to deep purple, the spectrum reserved for high-ranking officials. The Imperial commander had arrived early. All exits are sealing, Aisha reported, tension finally breaking through her composure. Security forces converging on your position from 3 directions. Morgan felt the familiar sensation of being trapped, but something else rose within her, a strange clarity as her heartbeat quickened. Time seemed to slow as she noticed details previously overlooked. The environmental control panel, the maintenance hatch ratings, the emergency protocols posted by the door. Everyone follow me, she said with sudden certainty. I know how we're getting out. What happened next would become legend among the resistance. Morgan orchestrated an escape, using the facility's own safety protocols against it, triggering cascading emergency responses, exploiting the Vordax inability to process multiple simultaneous crises, and using the commander's own shuttle clearance codes to secure their exit. As their stolen vessel broke through the Martian atmosphere, Zhao Wei turned to Morgan with newfound respect. How did you see the pattern? Even I couldn't have calculated those variables. Morgan touched the small scar behind her ear where her inhibitor had been. I didn't calculate. I felt the solution. She smiled. And that's exactly what terrifies them. The abandoned subway station beneath Old Sydney had become the network's primary coordination hub. Morgan studied the analog map spread across a repurposed maintenance table, small lights indicating resistance cells forming across Earth and the lunar colonies. Each light represented dozens of humans working in absolute secrecy, their neural inhibitors deactivated by Okafor's increasingly refined procedure. Another supply convoy disappeared near the asteroid belt. Zhao reported, entering the room with a stack of printed manifests. Third one this month. The Vordax Logistics Guild is in complete disarray. Morgan allowed herself a small smile. Operation Whisper was working even better than anticipated. The subtle code errors planted by Aisha's tech team were cascading through Vordax systems, creating inefficiencies too minor to trigger security protocols, but significant enough to disrupt Imperial operations throughout the solar system. How are they responding? Morgan asked. Zhao handed her a stolen communication transcript. They formed 3 separate analysis committees with representatives from each species. According to our sources, they're arguing over methodology rather than making progress. They can't conceptualize deliberate inefficiency, Dr. Okafor observed, looking up from his workstation, where he was analyzing neural inhibitor designs. Their evolutionary history never required it. The concept of sabotage through imperceptible degradation, rather than direct attack, doesn't fit their mental models. Morgan nodded. And that's our advantage. They're looking for enemies who think like they do. The resistance had grown exponentially since the successful Mars rescue. Liberated humans displayed abilities that shocked even themselves: accelerated learning, intuitive problem-solving, and most importantly, unprecedented cooperation that transcended old Earth divisions. Former enemies now worked together with seamless coordination that required minimal verbal communication. Aisha burst into the room, her young face alight with excitement. It worked. The maintenance subsystems accepted our ghost protocols. She connected her salvage tablet to the central display. Screens flickered to life, showing Vordak shipping schedules, security rotations, and resource allocation plans. All transmitted through communication channels the Imperial engineers had declared obsolete decades ago. They dismantled the old Earth internet infrastructure but never removed the physical transmission lines. Aisha explained. We're using frequencies and protocols they consider primitive. Their monitoring systems don't even recognize the signals as data. Morgan studied the information with growing satisfaction. This confirms what we suspected. They're pulling security forces from the outer colonies to reinforce Central Command. They still think this is a localized rebellion. A soft chime interrupted them, the signal for a new arrival. The heavy steel doors opened to reveal a thin man with hollow eyes, supported by 2 resistance members. Morgan recognized him immediately, Chief Engineer Collins from the orbital shipyards. I came as soon as my inhibitor was removed, he said weakly. I have critical information. Morgan helped him to a seat as Okafor checked his vital signs. They're building something in the high orbit shipyards, Collins whispered. Something they've never attempted before. Not weapons or ships. It's a massive neural interface. They're planning to connect their 5 species into a unified consciousness. A heavy silence fell over the room. They're trying to adapt, Morgan realized, cold certainty settling in her stomach. They're attempting to match our unpredictability by combining their mental strengths. Aisha looked up from her analysis. Combining rigid systems won't create flexibility. No, Morgan agreed, her mind already racing ahead to implications and opportunities. But it shows they finally understand what they're facing. They recognize that humanity's greatest weapon isn't technology or numbers. Zhao Wei finished the thought. It's how our minds work together while remaining independent. Morgan turned back to the map, watching the lights multiply. Which means we've already changed the universe. Now we just need to survive long enough for everyone else to realize it. Morgan pressed her back against the curved maintenance tunnel, feeling the vibration of massive machinery through the metal. The control center on Saturn's largest moon dwarfed any human structure ever built, designed for the enormous Khazar species with their 3-meter frames and natural armor plating. She and her 5-person infiltration team looked like children by comparison, using service passages never intended for regular access. Security sweep passing above us, whispered Raphael, the team's sensor specialist. His modified Vordak scanner showed heat signatures of the guards moving in perfect geometric patterns, utterly predictable and precisely timed. Morgan checked the countdown on her wrist display. In exactly 47 seconds, the first of Aisha's program disruptions would begin. Everyone remember, Morgan said softly, Khazar sensory systems cannot process multiple simultaneous inputs. When the chaos starts, they'll follow emergency protocols exactly as written. We'll use their predictability against them. Zhao Wei adjusted her salvaged uniform, a maintenance technician designation that would grant limited access to non-sensitive areas. And if we encounter unpredicted variables. Morgan smiled slightly. Then we do what humans do best, improvise. The countdown reached 0. Somewhere across the facility, environmental sensors began registering false atmospheric fluctuations. As predicted, Khazar security teams responded with textbook precision, redirecting forces to investigate. Morgan's team slipped through suddenly unguarded passages toward the central control hub. 3 levels down, they encountered their first serious obstacle, an unexpected biometric checkpoint not shown on their stolen schematics. Aisha's voice came through their secure comms from her position in the network's hidden command post millions of kilometers away. The checkpoint wasn't in our intelligence, she said, frustration evident. It's new. Morgan studied the system. Integrated atmospheric sensors, retinal scanners calibrated for quasar optical patterns, and a pressure plate designed for their massive weight. Bypassing it would require equipment they didn't have and time they couldn't spare. Second distraction sequence initiating in 20 seconds, Raphael reported. But security will lock down this section completely when it triggers. Morgan felt that familiar clarity again, her mind suddenly processing information faster than she could consciously track. She saw connections between systems that hadn't been obvious before. "Aisha, can you access the maintenance scheduling system?" Morgan asked. "Yes, but it's separate from security controls," the tech prodigy replied. "Perfect. Schedule an emergency filter replacement for this section. Now." Within moments, warning lights activated as atmospheric systems prepared for maintenance. The security checkpoint automatically entered standby mode to allow worker access. As they slipped through, Jia Wei gave Morgan an impressed glance. "How did you know that would work?" "I didn't," Morgan admitted. "But their systems are designed for efficiency, not security. One priority automatically overrides another." They reached the secondary control room as the facility erupted into cascading alarms. On multiple screens, they watched Quasar security forces responding to phantom environmental failures, system malfunctions, and communication disruptions, all proceeding exactly as the Resistance had planned. While the guards followed rigid protocols, Morgan's team executed the real mission. Aisha guided them remotely through the process of altering shipment records and resource allocations, making it appear that the Silith faction was diverting resources from Khazar-controlled territories. As they completed the final adjustments, a group of humans emerged from hiding. Maintenance workers assigned to the facility who had survived by remaining invisible to their masters. "You're really doing it," whispered a young woman, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're making them fight each other instead of us." Morgan nodded, watching the panic spread through Vordax communications. They built their empire on the assumption that all intelligent beings think as they do, in straight lines and logical progressions. They never understood that humanity's chaotic nature is our greatest strength. She gestured toward the exit route as the facility's systems continued their orchestrated malfunction. "Now let's show them what else we can do." Morgan sat cross-legged in the dimly lit chamber, eyes closed, breath measured. Around her, 20 Resistance members mirrored her posture, their faces serene despite the danger surrounding them. The ancient mindfulness techniques drawn from Earth's meditation traditions had become essential since the Vordax deployed their thought harvesters. "Hold the image of still water in your mind," Dr. Okafor instructed softly. "Thoughts may arise, but let them pass without attachment." The harvesters detect emotional spikes, not controlled contemplation. 3 days earlier, a thought harvester had passed within 20 meters of their hidden base beneath the ruins of old Bangkok. The empathic enforcers could sense rebellious intent through walls and shielding, but the Resistance had discovered their limitation. They could not distinguish meditative calm from genuine acceptance of Vordax rule. As the session concluded, Morgan reviewed the latest intelligence reports. Thought harvesters had compromised 6 Resistance cells across the solar system. Each time, the pattern was identical, sudden raids precisely targeting key personnel with no warning. "The neural mappings from our latest subjects are extraordinary," Dr. Okafor said, joining her at the command table. Dark circles underlined his eyes after working through 3 nights, analyzing data from volunteers whose inhibitors had been removed. "Look at this." He activated a holographic display showing paired brain scans. The left shows normal human neural activity with inhibitors removed. The right shows the same person during crisis simulation. Morgan studied the images. The right scan blazed with activity, neural pathways lighting up in patterns unlike anything she'd seen before. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "What the Vordax fear most," Okafor replied. "Humans entering what ancient texts called flow states, a condition where consciousness merges with action. The inhibitors weren't just suppressing our normal cognition. They were preventing these enhanced states from emerging. He gestured to another display showing performance metrics. In these states, reaction time decreases by 40%. Pattern recognition increases by 70%. Creative problem-solving accelerates exponentially. And the Vordax can't experience this. Their neurophysiology doesn't allow it. They evolved in stable environments, where methodical planning was more valuable than rapid adaptation. When they face crisis, their cognitive function decreases. When we face crisis, ours expands. A soft alarm pulsed, indicating an incoming transmission. Zhao Wei's face appeared on the secure channel, her expression grave. The coordinated raids on the biotechnology facility succeeded, she reported. Our teams secured the classified research, but at heavy cost. Morgan felt a cold weight in her stomach. How many lost? 17, but what they recovered. Zhao paused, visibly struggling. Morgan, you need to see this immediately. Hours later, the Resistance Council gathered in emergency session. The recovered Vordax first contact protocols displayed on the central screen told a horrifying story. 16 species encountered before humans, 16 worlds deemed unmanageable and sterilized. Earth had been designated the final experiment in controlled integration, before the Vordax would resort to their standard extinction protocol. They never intended to coexist with us, Morgan said, her voice steady despite the revelation. We were always meant to be either slaves or extinct. Silence fell over the gathered leaders. Some faces showed despair, others fury. A mining colony representative spoke first. If they've done this 16 times before, how can we possibly win? Morgan studied the data showing the fate of other worlds, seeing not just horror but revelation. Because those 16 species fought alone, she answered. And we've learned what the Vordax never could, that individual brilliance multiplies rather than adds when minds work in concert. They destroyed separate worlds. We're becoming something new together. She stood, her decision made. We're not fighting for freedom anymore. We're fighting for survival. And that's when humans become truly dangerous. The abandoned orbital shipyard floated in Earth's shadow, its Vordax builders having deemed it obsolete decades ago. Now this forgotten relic hummed with activity as humans from every corner of the planet contributed to an audacious vision, building a space fleet to challenge the greatest military power the galaxy had ever known. Morgan moved through the central assembly bay, watching teams weld salvaged Vordax drive components to frameworks designed by Earth engineers who had never built spacecraft before. The lack of established shipbuilding traditions had initially seemed a devastating weakness. Now it was proving their greatest asset. Conventional shipbuilding would have doomed us, explained Kazuo Tanaka, the engineering coordinator who had once designed underwater habitats before the invasion. We'd have created pale imitations of Vordax vessels and been destroyed immediately. He gestured toward the nearest ship-taking form, an asymmetrical construct that seemed to defy standard physics. Instead, we're building vessels no Vordax tactical system would recognize as functional. Morgan studied the prototype designated as Prometheus. Unlike Vordax ships with their perfect geometric symmetry, this vessel featured deliberate irregularities in its structure. Weapon emplacements were scattered in patterns that seemed random, but actually provided overlapping fields of fire from unexpected angles. How do you even control something so unconventional? Morgan asked. That's the true innovation, Kazuo said with pride, leading her to a circular chamber within the partially completed hull. Conventional command structures are hierarchical. Captain issues orders, crew obeys. We've created something different. The command center contained no captain's chair, no central authority position. Instead, station interfaces were arranged in a ring, allowing operators to see each other while accessing their systems. We call it distributed cognition, Kazuo explained. Decisions flow between stations based on changing conditions rather than fixed protocols. In combat, leadership shifts to whoever has the best solution for the immediate challenge. The Vordax will never understand it, Morgan realized. Their entire civilization is built on hierarchy and specialization. Exactly. Their tactical computers are designed to predict responses based on established doctrine. Our ships will have no doctrine, only principles and shared purpose. Throughout the shipyard, similar innovations were taking shape. Engineers from the Arabian Peninsula had developed heat dispersal systems inspired by desert adaptations. Teams from maritime regions created vessels with redundant systems mirroring resilient coral ecosystems. Orbital construction workers built asymmetrical weapon configurations that Vordax computers would dismiss as inefficient until facing them in combat. 3 days later, Morgan stood with Zhao Wei and Dr. Okafor as the Prometheus detached from its construction cradle. Its strange silhouette against Earth's blue backdrop seemed to embody humanity's defiance, beautiful not despite its irregularities but because of them. "It's one ship against an armada," Okafor said quietly. "The odds are impossible." "Impossible is where humans thrive," Morgan replied. "And it's not alone." As if summoned by her words, communication channels lit up with reports from hidden construction sites throughout the solar system. In the asteroid belt, beneath the ice of Europa, in the cloud cities of Venus, humans had been building. Dozens of unique vessels emerged from concealment, each reflecting the ingenuity of its creators. The Prometheus's commander, Captain Alina Rodriguez, transmitted from the bridge as her crew settled into their unprecedented command configuration. "We're ready," she reported, her voice steady despite the weight of history. "The Vordax patrol near Europa has detected us and is moving to intercept. They're maintaining perfect formation, exactly as their tactical doctrines require." Morgan nodded, feeling strangely calm as humanity prepared for its first true space battle. "Then show them what we've become." The Prometheus accelerated toward its destiny, its unconventional design a declaration to the universe. Perfection is static, but imperfection adapts. The diplomatic chamber aboard the neutral station had once been a Vordax administrative center. Now it served as the unlikely setting for humanity's first official contact with dissident factions of the Imperium. Morgan studied the two representatives seated across the table, a Silith with iridescent scales that shifted color with emotional states, and a Novan whose crystalline exoskeleton refracted light in complex patterns. "We take considerable risk meeting like this," the Silith representative said, her scales fluctuating between deep blue caution and amber curiosity. "The Khazar High Command has declared all contact with humans an act of treason. Yet here you are," Morgan observed. The Novan inclined his crystalline head. "Because what you have accomplished cannot be explained within Imperial doctrine." 17 human vessels defeated a Khazar battle group using tactics no simulation could predict. Word has spread throughout the Imperium. "And inspired others," the Silith added. "On 12 worlds, populations long thought pacified now show resistance using distinctly human methods. Random patterns, adaptive responses, decentralized leadership." Morgan felt the weight of this revelation. The ripples of Earth's rebellion had reached distant stars. "You're not just here to observe us. You want something." The two representatives exchanged glances. "We seek understanding," the Novan stated. "For generations, the Khazar have dominated through technological superiority and rigid control. They classified other species by their adherence to order. Humans were designated highly disordered, and therefore inferior. Yet disorder has proven stronger than order," the Silith continued. "We wish to learn how." Before Morgan could respond, an emergency signal interrupted them. Aisha's voice came through, tense with urgency. "Morgan, you need to return immediately. The network's central council is fracturing." Within hours, Morgan stood before the assembled resistance leaders in their hidden lunar base. The room crackled with tension as Admiral Chen, leader of the Eastern Pacific Fleet, confronted her. "You negotiate with them while they still hold our worlds," he demanded. "After Europa, we should press our advantage and destroy every Vordax outpost in the system." Voices rose in agreement while others called for restraint. The strain of victories had emboldened many to believe total victory possible. Morgan saw the dangerous path unfolding, humans adopting the very absolutism that defined their oppressors. Silence. Dr. Okafor's voice cut through the chaos. Look at what's happening. We're dividing just as they've always been divided. Morgan stepped forward. That division is why they're failing. Each Vordax species pursues its own perfect solution, competing rather than collaborating. If we mirror their behavior, we deserve their fate. The Admiral's face hardened. Pretty words while Earth remains under their control. Before the argument could escalate further, all communication systems simultaneously activated. Screens displayed the same devastating image. Massive Vordax planet killer vessels moving toward Earth, their weapon systems powering up. This is the Imperium's response to negotiation, the Admiral said grimly. Annihilation. A deathly silence fell over the room. The thought of Earth destroyed was too horrific to process. Then a voice spoke from the back. Captain Rodriguez of the Prometheus. Our ships were built by different hands with different dreams, she said quietly. We never agreed on design or doctrine, or even purpose. Yet when we faced the enemy together, we moved as one mind with many expressions. She stepped forward, her gaze sweeping the room. That's what the Vordax can never understand or replicate. They see our differences as weakness because they can only conceive of unity through conformity. Morgan watched understanding dawn across faces that moments before had been set in opposition. We don't need to agree on everything, she said. We only need to agree on what matters now. The resistance leaders looked at the screens showing Earth's peril, then at each other. Differences remained, but something more important united them. The recognition that humanity's future would be written together or not at all. Every ship we have, Admiral Chen said finally. Every pilot, every weapon. Earth will not fall today. As the emergency mobilization began, Morgan turned to Dr. Okafor. Contact our Silith and Novan friends. Tell them if they truly wish to understand humans, they're about to witness our greatest demonstration. The negotiation chamber aboard the newly constructed Unity station hummed with significance. 1 year after the battle that saved Earth, representatives from 27 species gathered to sign what many were already calling the most important document in galactic history. Morgan observed the assembled delegates with quiet amazement. Vordax sitting alongside humans and formerly subjugated species, all engaged in animated conversation. The path to this moment had been neither straight nor simple. After humanity's unprecedented victory against the planet-killer fleet, the Imperium had fractured irreparably. The Khazar hardliners had pushed for continued war, but their resources were depleted and support among other species had evaporated. The Silith and Novan factions had broken away entirely, openly allying with humans. Morgan felt a presence beside her and turned to find the elderly Vordax historian, who had been documenting the proceedings with meticulous care. Remarkable, isn't it? He said, his translator rendering his complex tonal language into English. For 10,000 years, our civilization believed harmony required uniformity. Your species proved otherwise in a single generation. Morgan studied the draft charter displayed above the central table. Unlike the rigid hierarchical structure of the old Imperium, the new Galactic Federation was built on principles of adaptive governance, systems designed to evolve with changing circumstances rather than imposing fixed solutions. It wasn't an easy victory, Morgan replied, thinking of the lives lost and the difficult compromises made. The most significant transformations rarely are. The historian observed, what fascinates me is how your species transcended the very conflict that created you. You fought not to dominate, but to change the nature of power itself. Across the chamber, Dr. Okafor was demonstrating the repurposed neural interface technology, originally designed to suppress human creativity, but now adapted to allow voluntary sharing of sensory experiences between species. A group of young Khazar were experiencing human music for the first time, their normally rigid postures swaying slightly as they felt rhythms their species had never conceived. I must confess, The Vordax historian continued. Many of us believed you would simply replace us as the dominant power. That was the pattern we understood. One perfect system replacing another. Instead, you introduced concepts we had never imagined. Governance through diversity, strength through adaptation, unity without uniformity. The chamber lights dimmed, signaling the approach of the signing ceremony. As delegates moved toward their positions, Morgan found herself standing beside a Silith diplomat whose scales shimmered with excitement. Your rebellion changed everything, the Silith said. Not just political structures, but how we understand intelligence itself. Before humans, we measured cognitive advancement by how perfectly a species could optimize existing patterns. You showed us that true intelligence might be measured by the ability to break patterns and create new ones. As the delegates gathered around the central table, Morgan observed the remarkable tableau. Species that weeks earlier had been mortal enemies now joined in nervous, hopeful collaboration. When the Khazar High Counselor placed his authorization mark beside the human representative's signature, spontaneous applause erupted across the chamber. Later, as celebration spread throughout the station, Morgan found a quiet observation deck overlooking Earth. The planet shone blue and white against the darkness, appearing deceptively peaceful from orbit. She thought about how close they had come to losing it entirely. A young diplomat approached, hesitant to interrupt her solitude. "They're asking for you to speak," she said. "Everyone wants to hear from the person who started it all." Morgan shook her head slightly. No single person started this. That was always the point. She turned from the viewport to follow the young woman back to the gathering. As they walked, she glimpsed ships moving in harmonious formation outside. Vessels of dozens of designs and origins, their diversity a living embodiment of the principles now guiding their shared future. "We never wanted to rule," Morgan said softly. "We fought so every being could become their fullest self." The young diplomat nodded. "And now, the stars are truly unwritten."